Thunder roared violently across the darkening city sky as heavy rain crashed against the streets in endless waves. The luxurious Grand Plaza Hotel stood glowing beneath the storm, its golden lights cutting through the cold grey evening like a beacon of wealth and power. Expensive luxury cars lined up outside the entrance, while reporters and photographers rushed beneath umbrellas, capturing every important guest arriving for the grand opening ceremony of the city's newest bridge project, Horizon Bridge. In the middle of all that glamour and prestige, an old city bus slowly pushed through the rain. Its faded yellow paint was peeling in several places, and the aging engine growled tiredly before finally stopping near the flower beds in front of the hotel entrance. The squeal of the brakes drew a few irritated looks from nearby guests. The bus doors opened. Ethan Carter stepped out first. At 42 years old, Ethan carried the appearance of a man shaped by years of hard work and quiet sacrifice. His old blue bus driver uniform had faded around the shoulders and collar, and his worn brown jacket was soaked from the storm. Despite the age of his clothes, everything about him was clean, organized, and dignified. He quickly opened a large black umbrella and turned back toward the bus. "Careful with the puddles, Angel." His deep, warm voice softened against the sound of the rain. A little girl stepped down carefully beside him. Lily Carter, 10 years old, held tightly onto her small backpack while staying close to her father beneath the umbrella. Her pink coat was old and slightly worn at the sleeves, but neatly cleaned and carefully buttoned. She looked up at Ethan with pure admiration shining in her eyes. "We'll head home after I turn in my shift report," Ethan said gently. "Then we'll cook dinner together." Lily smiled softly and nodded. At that exact moment, the glass revolving doors of Grand Plaza opened. Victoria Hale emerged from the lobby, surrounded by security guards and hotel staff holding umbrellas over her head. The young CEO wore a perfectly tailored white designer suit that reflected wealth, authority, and cold confidence. Every movement she made carried the elegance of someone used to power. Walking closely behind her was Daniel Brooks, the company's media manager, dressed in a flawless black suit while holding a digital tablet beneath one arm. Daniel immediately noticed the old bus parked near the entrance. His face twisted with annoyance. He looked Ethan up and down before letting out a mocking laugh. "What is this supposed to be?" Daniel said loudly. "Since when does a luxury hotel become a parking spot for city buses?" Several nearby employees awkwardly lowered their heads. Daniel stepped forward again, his voice growing sharper. "Our guests are billionaires and government officials. Do you seriously think this rusted piece of junk belongs in front of an event like this?" Lily flinched slightly. Her small fingers tightened around her father's sleeve. Ethan remained completely calm. He simply lowered the umbrella a little further to shield Lily from the rain. That quiet composure somehow irritated Daniel even more. Then Victoria stopped walking. Slowly, she removed her sunglasses and glanced toward Ethan with cold, detached eyes, as if he were something completely out of place in her world. A faint smile appeared at the corner of her lips. "Why waste your breath, Daniel?" she said calmly. "Some people are born at the bottom, and they never learn where they truly belong." The air suddenly felt heavier. Victoria walked past Ethan without another glance. Daniel smirked before following behind her, and the group disappeared beneath the bright golden lights of the hotel lobby. Only the sound of rain remained. The camera slowly moved toward Lily's face. Her smile had vanished completely. Her eyes lowered toward the wet pavement as embarrassment and sadness filled her expression. She had heard every single word. She clutched her backpack tightly against her chest. Ethan looked at his daughter quietly. For the briefest moment, sadness passed through his eyes, but instead of reacting with anger, he slowly crouched down in front of Lily so they were face to face beneath the umbrella. Rain continued pouring heavily behind them while thunder echoed through the city. Ethan gently brushed a strand of wet hair away from Lily's face. "It's okay," he said softly. "Remember this, Lily. A person's true value is never measured by the clothes they wear, but by what they are willing to do for others." Lily looked up at her father with watery eyes. The calm strength in Ethan's voice slowly melted away her sadness. She wrapped her arms around his neck tightly. Ethan smiled faintly, lifted his daughter into his arms, and walked away through the storm. Behind them remained the glowing luxury of Grand Plaza Hotel. Ahead of them waited only darkness, heavy rain, and a storm growing stronger with every passing minute. The storm continued throughout the night as Ethan and Lily finally returned home to their small apartment on the outskirts of the city. The building itself looked worn down by time, with faded paint peeling from the hallways and old pipes rattling softly behind the walls. Their apartment was tiny and dimly lit, but every corner was carefully organized. Despite the age of the furniture and the cracked walls stained slightly yellow from years of use, the place carried a quiet warmth that expensive homes often lacked. The camera slowly moved across the apartment. A tiny wooden dining table stood near the kitchen window. A second-hand couch sat against the wall beside a small bookshelf filled with Lily's schoolbooks. Rain tapped steadily against the thin glass windows while the weak ceiling light flickered occasionally above them. In the small kitchen, Ethan stood wearing a faded apron over his old bus driver uniform. He flipped an egg carefully in a scratched frying pan whose non-stick coating had almost completely worn away. Beside it, a pot of vegetable soup simmered gently, filling the apartment with warmth and comfort. Despite working double shifts nearly every day, Ethan still smiled quietly whenever he looked toward his daughter. Lily sat at the small dining table, coloring in an old sketchbook with short-colored pencils that had been sharpened down almost to the fingertips. She hummed softly to herself while waiting for dinner. A few moments later, Ethan placed a warm plate of food in front of her with exaggerated pride. "And dinner is served," he announced playfully. "Chef Ethan's special meal for Lady Lily tonight." Lily giggled immediately. The plate in front of her held the best portions of the meal, the larger egg, extra meat, and fresh vegetables carefully arranged to look more appetizing. Meanwhile, Ethan quietly filled his own bowl with leftover rice from the previous night, and mostly vegetables. He sat across from Lily, resting one elbow against the table as he watched her eat happily. For a brief moment, the exhaustion in his eyes disappeared completely. The rain outside continued falling endlessly. Later that night, Lily had already fallen asleep beneath a thin blanket on her small bed tucked beside the living room wall. Her stuffed bear rested tightly against her chest while the distant thunder echoed outside. Ethan carefully adjusted the blanket around her shoulders before turning off the nearby lamp. The tenderness in his eyes revealed far more than words ever could. He quietly stepped into the living room corner where an old desk lamp flickered weakly from damaged wiring. Without hesitation, Ethan grabbed a small toolbox from beneath the couch and began repairing it himself. His rough hands moved with calm precision. He unscrewed the base carefully, stripped the damaged wires, and wrapped them tightly with black electrical tape before reconnecting everything piece by piece. Clearly, this was not a man unfamiliar with working under pressure. The camera slowly focused on a worn notebook lying open beside him. Inside were neatly written lists of expenses: rent, electricity, school supplies for Lily, groceries, bus maintenance fees, extra night shifts on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. Every dollar had been carefully calculated and stretched as far as possible. Ethan stared silently at the numbers for several long seconds. Then he let out a quiet, exhausted sigh and rubbed his forehead slowly. The weight of responsibility rested heavily on him, yet not once had he complained. Outside the apartment, thunder rolled again across the sky. A short while later, Ethan grabbed a flashlight and quietly stepped outside through a sliding metal door beside the kitchen. The cold night air rushed into the narrow hallway as he entered a small storage garage connected to the building. The garage was cramped, damp, and filled with stacked cardboard boxes and forgotten tools. A single yellow light bulb hung from the ceiling, casting weak shadows across the room. Ethan walked toward the farthest corner and knelt beside an old metal shelf. Slowly, he reached underneath and pulled out a small wooden chest covered in dust. He hesitated briefly. Then he brushed the dust away and unlocked it. The flashlight illuminated the contents inside. Several old bronze bravery medals rested carefully wrapped in cloth, a metal rescue whistle with a faded strap, detailed waterway maps covered with handwritten markings about river currents, dangerous rocks, and emergency routes throughout the city. Worn rescue equipment, old climbing carabiners, emergency flotation gear, and beneath everything else, a laminated photograph. The younger Ethan stood smiling proudly beside a rescue team wearing water rescue uniforms. For the first time in the story, the calmness in Ethan's eyes shifted slightly. Pain, memory, regret. Something buried deep inside him still had not healed. His rough fingers slowly brushed across the surface of the photograph. Then suddenly, soft footsteps echoed behind him. "Dad?" "Huh." Lily stood near the doorway, holding her stuffed bear tightly against her chest, her sleepy voice barely audible above the rain. Ethan immediately closed the chest. Almost instinctively, he turned back toward her with a warm smile. "Just looking for some tools to fix the pipes tomorrow," he said gently. "Why are you awake? Did the thunder scare you?" Lily slowly walked closer, her curious eyes fixed on the mysterious wooden chest she had briefly seen open. "Dad," she asked softly, tilting her head, "what did you do before becoming a bus driver?" The question lingered heavily in the air. The camera slowly moved closer to Ethan's face. For a brief moment, sadness appeared deep within his eyes, but just as quickly, he hid it behind the same gentle smile Lily knew so well. Ethan lifted her into his arms and rubbed his beard playfully against her cheek, making her laugh quietly. Then he looked toward the rain outside the garage door. "A job," he said softly. "A job I hope you never have to experience yourself someday." His voice carried an unfamiliar heaviness. Then he kissed Lily's forehead gently. "Come on, princess. You need sleep." He glanced briefly toward the distant storm outside. "Tomorrow, I have to drive a very special route across the new bridge." Ethan carried Lily back toward the apartment, while the old wooden chest remained hidden in the darkness behind them. Outside, lightning flashed violently across the city sky as the storm slowly grew stronger. Morning arrived beneath dark storm clouds that never truly disappeared overnight. Heavy rain still poured across the city, while violent winds swept through the streets, bending trees and rattling windows throughout downtown. Despite repeated weather warnings from local authorities, the grand opening ceremony for Horizon Bridge continued exactly as planned. High above the river, the massive suspension bridge stretched across the water like a monument to human ambition. Drone cameras captured the enormous event from the sky. Luxury vehicles lined both sides of the entrance road, while reporters hurried through the rain, carrying microphones and camera equipment beneath umbrellas. Rows of red banners snapped violently in the wind, displaying giant golden letters that read, "Proudly celebrating the safest bridge in the city." A large outdoor stage had been constructed near the bridge entrance, where dozens of wealthy investors, politicians, and corporate executives sat beneath heated VIP tents protected from the rain. Professional live stream crews moved rapidly between cameras, broadcasting every moment live across social media platforms. At the center of the stage stood Victoria Hale. Wearing a long cream-colored designer coat over her tailored suit, she held a transparent umbrella while confidently addressing the crowd through a wireless microphone. Even beneath the storm, Victoria carried herself with absolute control and pride. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced confidently, her voice echoing through the speakers above the roaring wind, "despite storm number 4 making landfall today, we are standing here as proof that human innovation is stronger than nature itself." Applause erupted from the audience. Victoria continued without hesitation. "Horizon Bridge is not only an architectural masterpiece, it is the safest structure this city has ever built, designed to withstand the harshest environmental conditions imaginable." The crowd applauded even louder. But beyond the stage, the river below churned violently beneath the bridge. Dark water crashed against the support pillars with frightening force. Nearby warning lights flickered against the rain. Less than 100 meters away, Ethan Carter stood beside Bus 42 at a temporary transit station near the bridge entrance. Unlike the polished executives surrounding the event, Ethan still wore the same faded blue uniform from the previous day. Rainwater dripped steadily from the edge of his old jacket as he crouched beside the front tire, carefully checking the pressure with practiced attention. He moved methodically around the vehicle, inspecting the brakes, windshield wipers, and emergency systems one by one. A transit supervisor suddenly jogged toward him through the rain. "Ethan!" The supervisor knocked twice against the bus door with excitement. "You got assigned the first official crossing today." Ethan looked up quietly. "You'll be transporting company employees, VIP guests, and some selected civilians across the bridge during the ceremony. The media's covering the whole thing live, so be careful out there." Ethan nodded politely, but instead of answering immediately, his eyes slowly drifted toward the bridge itself. The massive suspension cables swayed subtly in the wind. Far below, the river currents looked stronger than normal. Something about the movement of the water made Ethan's expression tighten slightly. Years of rescue experience whispered danger somewhere deep inside his instincts. But he said nothing. He simply climbed into the driver's seat and started the engine. Several minutes later, Bus 42 slowly rolled toward the red carpet boarding area near the ceremony stage. Guests began stepping aboard one after another. Some were excited tourists invited to witness the historic first crossing. Others were company employees holding branded umbrellas and filming videos for social media. Inside the bus, conversations filled the air. Then suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. Security guards quickly moved through the entrance clearing space. Victoria Hale approached the bus, surrounded by Daniel Brooks, camera operators, assistants, and bodyguards. Daniel had personally arranged this publicity stunt. The powerful CEO crossing the bridge aboard a public city bus alongside ordinary citizens would create the perfect humble leader image for the live stream audience. As Victoria stepped aboard, the noisy chatter inside the bus instantly quieted. Passengers moved aside immediately. Her expensive heels clicked sharply against the rubber floor as she walked forward confidently. Then she stopped. Daniel stopped beside her. Both of them recognized the man sitting behind the steering wheel instantly. The same bus driver from the hotel the night before. Daniel's expression twisted into disbelief before turning into amusement. "Well, look at this," he laughed mockingly as he grabbed the metal safety rail near Ethan's seat. "I didn't realize the city was desperate enough to hand a historic event to someone like you." A few passengers exchanged uncomfortable glances. Daniel smirked wider. "Hopefully you know how to drive this thing without stalling in the middle of the bridge." Ethan calmly finished writing information into the route logbook before placing his pen down carefully. Then he looked up at Daniel. His expression remained completely still. That calmness irritated Daniel more than anger ever could. Victoria stepped slightly closer, brushing raindrops from her expensive sleeve with visible annoyance. Her cold eyes slowly scanned Ethan's worn uniform, stopping briefly at the frayed fabric near his elbows. "Please sit up straight and try to look professional," she said coldly. "That old uniform of yours is going to ruin the image of this event on live television." The camera moved closer toward Ethan's hands, resting on the steering wheel. Faint scars stretched across his knuckles, and fingers' old marks from years long buried in the past. For a brief moment, his grip tightened slightly, but his voice remained calm and respectful. "My responsibility," Ethan said evenly, "is getting everyone safely to the other side." His eyes lifted briefly toward the bridge ahead. "As for the image of the event, I think that depends more on the quality of the bridge than the clothes I'm wearing." Silence spread through the bus for a moment. Even several passengers looked surprised by his composure. Victoria narrowed her eyes coldly before turning away without another word. Daniel clicked his tongue in disgust before following her toward the specially prepared VIP seating area lined with velvet cushions near the center of the bus. Outside, thunder rumbled once again across the city. The windshield wipers struggled desperately against the relentless rain as Ethan slowly released them. The heavy vehicle rolled toward Horizon Bridge while violent winds shook the massive suspension cables overhead. Inside the bus sat wealth, pride, ordinary civilians, and a quiet man carrying secrets no one understood. Ahead of them, waited the storm. The storm reached its full fury by midday. From high above the city, Horizon Bridge looked tiny beneath the overwhelming force of nature. Massive sheets of rain slammed against the suspension cables, while violent winds shook the towering support pillars from side to side. The river below had transformed into a raging torrent of muddy water, crashing against the concrete foundations with terrifying force. Lightning split across the dark sky. Thunder followed immediately after. The giant bridge groaned beneath the pressure of the storm. Far below, emergency warning sirens echoed faintly across the riverbanks, nearly drowned out by the sound of wind and rain. Bus 42 continued moving slowly across the center lane of the bridge. Inside the driver's cabin, Ethan Carter gripped the steering wheel firmly with both hands. His windshield wipers moved at maximum speed, but the rain remained so heavy that visibility dropped almost to nothing every few seconds. The bus itself had started trembling. At first, the movement felt subtle, but then Ethan felt it again. A vibration beneath the wheels. Not normal road movement. Not wind. Something worse. The camera slowly moved toward the dashboard. Several warning lights suddenly flickered across the display panel. System instability. Traction alerts. Bridge wind hazard notifications. A sharp, metallic creaking sound echoed somewhere outside the vehicle. Ethan's expression changed instantly. Years of rescue work had trained him to recognize danger long before panic began. His eyes narrowed slightly as instinct took over. Outside the side window, he could see the suspension cables swaying harder than before. The storm was growing stronger every minute. Slowly, Ethan lowered the driver's side window slightly. The freezing wind immediately exploded into the cabin. Rain sprayed across his face. Ignoring it completely, Ethan leaned slightly closer and looked down toward the river below. What he saw made his stomach tighten. The water currents had changed. The river was no longer flowing naturally beneath the bridge. Gigantic circular currents twisted violently around the support columns, slamming massive pressure waves directly against the foundations. The muddy water level had risen dramatically since morning. Ethan's breathing slowed. His rescue instincts immediately understood the danger. Too much pressure, too much vibration, too much structural stress. Something was terribly wrong. Without hesitation, Ethan slammed the brakes. The entire bus jerked violently. Passengers cried out in surprise as several people grabbed onto seats to avoid falling. The heavy vehicle screeched to a stop directly near the center section of Horizon Bridge. Inside the bus, confused murmurs spread immediately. Ethan stood halfway from his seat and turned toward the passengers. His voice remained calm but firm. Everyone listened carefully. The tension in his tone instantly caught attention. The bridge structure is vibrating abnormally. Rain hammered against the windows behind him. We cannot continue forward. For several seconds, silence filled the bus. Then, the complaints began. What? Is he serious? We stopped in the middle of the bridge. Daniel Brooks immediately stood from his VIP seat, nearly stumbling as another violent gust shook the vehicle sideways. He grabbed his tablet camera, which was still live streaming the event to thousands of online viewers, and pointed it directly toward Ethan with open mockery. Oh, this is unbelievable. Daniel laughed sarcastically. A bus driver is suddenly a structural engineer now? A few nervous passengers laughed awkwardly. Daniel stepped closer down the aisle. You're interrupting a live broadcast in front of the entire city because of your imagination. The live stream camera captured Ethan standing calmly in the front cabin while rain battered the windshield behind him. Online comments rapidly flooded the screen. Why did the bus stop? Is this part of the ceremony? That driver looks terrified. Back in the VIP section, Victoria Hale remained seated with one leg crossed elegantly over the other. Unlike everyone else, she looked annoyed rather than concerned. To her, Ethan's warning sounded like nothing more than panic from a lower-class worker unable to handle pressure. She slowly removed one leather glove and glanced toward Ethan coldly. Continue driving, Victoria ordered sharply. Her voice carried absolute authority. Do not waste my time with your paranoia. Another violent tremor suddenly shook the bridge. This time, everyone felt it. The bus rattled hard enough for overhead lights to flicker briefly. Several passengers immediately grabbed onto nearby seats. A woman near the back gasped nervously. Outside the windows, the suspension cables groaned loudly beneath the wind. Ethan didn't move. His eyes stayed fixed on the bridge ahead. The rain blurred everything beyond the windshield, but he could still see subtle movement across the roadway surface. Tiny shifts, tiny bends, tiny signs most people would never notice. But Ethan noticed all of them. His hands slowly tightened around the steering wheel. "Something's wrong with the bridge," he repeated quietly. Daniel rolled his eyes dramatically. "Oh, please," he snapped. "This bridge cost hundreds of millions of dollars. You seriously think you understand engineering better than the people who built it?" Victoria leaned forward slightly from her seat. "Drive the bus." Her patience was disappearing quickly. Around them, passengers began whispering anxiously among themselves. Some looked toward Ethan with uncertainty. Others glanced nervously toward the storm outside. Another crack of thunder exploded overhead. The entire bridge shuddered again. This time, even Daniel's smirk faded for half a second. Then, a deep metallic groan echoed somewhere far ahead across the bridge structure. Not the sound of wind, not thunder. Something heavier, something breaking under pressure. The sound rolled slowly through the suspension cables, like a warning from the storm itself. Inside the bus, silence fell instantly. Even Victoria looked up. Ethan's eyes hardened, because he recognized that sound immediately. Structural failure. Ethan turned toward Victoria, preparing to argue one final time, but nature answered before he could speak. A deafening crack exploded beneath the bridge. The sound was so violent it felt like thunder erupting directly underneath the bus. Then came another, and another. Passengers screamed instantly. The entire roadway ahead suddenly split apart. Concrete shattered upward as enormous fractures ripped through the asphalt like lightning bolts spreading across glass. Steel support beams snapped with horrifying metallic shrieks, while the center section of Horizon Bridge began collapsing directly in front of them. For one frozen second, everyone inside the bus simply stared. Then the road disappeared. A massive section of the bridge tore loose and plunged into the raging river below. The impact sent an explosion of water and debris, hundreds of feet into the air. "Oh my God!" The bus violently lurched sideways. Ethan reacted instantly. He yanked the steering wheel with every ounce of strength in his body as the rear tires lost traction on the rain-soaked surface. The heavy vehicle skidded uncontrollably across the bridge while passengers were thrown violently from their seats. Suitcases, phones, and loose equipment flew through the air. The live stream cameras continued recording everything. Outside the windshield, the broken edge of the bridge rushed toward them, a bottomless drop into the floodwaters below. Ethan slammed the brakes again. The bus spun sideways. Crash. The entire vehicle smashed hard against the concrete divider near the collapsed section of roadway. Metal screamed. Glass exploded. Then, silence. For half a second, the bus stopped moving, but not safely. The front half of Bus 42 now hung partially over the destroyed edge of the bridge. Only the damaged divider and twisted rear wheels kept the vehicle from falling into the river below. Rain hammered against the tilted windows. The bus creaked dangerously beneath shifting weight. Inside the vehicle, absolute chaos erupted. Passengers screamed hysterically. Several people lay sprawled across the floor, bleeding from cuts caused by shattered glass. Others clung desperately to seats while trying not to slide toward the dangerously tilted front section of the bus. A child cried uncontrollably somewhere near the back. The overhead lights flickered violently. Then sparks exploded from the electrical panels overhead. Pop, pop, pop. Bright flashes illuminated terrified faces throughout the cabin. The smell of burning wires spread instantly. One side window shattered completely as another violent tremor shook the bridge. Outside, floodwaters surged beneath them like a living monster. The river no longer looked like water, it looked like death. The current smashed enormous debris against the bridge pillars, while waves crashed upward beneath the dangling front tires of the bus. Passengers panicked harder. "We're going to die! Help us! Open the doors!" Daniel Brooks had completely lost control. The arrogant media manager now slammed both fists repeatedly against the jammed side door while screaming in terror. "Open this thing! We have to get out." But the crash had twisted the bus frame badly. The doors wouldn't move. The electronic systems were dead. Emergency mechanisms failed completely. The main entrance remained sealed shut. Nearby, one of the live stream cameramen struggled desperately to stand, but another violent sway knocked him flat again. Yet somehow, the cameras were still running. Thousands of viewers across the city watched the disaster unfold live in real time. Inside the VIP section, Victoria Hale no longer resembled the composed CEO from earlier. Her elegant appearance had been destroyed within seconds. Her expensive coat was soaked from broken windows, spraying.
Thank you for watching my video.